First of all, I know there's a lot of familiar faces in the room, but as this is a public gathering, I wanted to introduce myself in Culture Action Europe. My name is Maya Weisinger. I'm the head of communications and community development at Culture Action Europe. We are the port of call for informed debate and opinion on arts and cultural policy in Europe and beyond. And we have a growing network of over 280 members across 35 countries. And this includes other cultural networks, associations, community organizations, artists, researchers, all with a shared invested interest in centering culture at the heart of decision making. So thank you all for joining us today. This is our first campaign meeting of the season, and actually it's the first campaign meeting we're holding. It's a new format that we're trying out to share updates and coordinate action around advocacy for the cultural sector. So today we're specifically discussing towards the Culture Compass, a sector blueprint, which is a discussion paper that we published alongside our network members earlier this week. And really, it outlines and proposes a collective vision for European cultural policies. So if you haven't seen it already, we can share a link in the chat. And we, of course, hope that you read it, share it, enjoy it, and dig deeper into it. Today, we'll actually hear from a few of the contributors, as this was a collaborative effort with multiple co-authors, multiple contributors, and get a closer view on their individual chapters. And then we'll hear from Louisa, our head of policy at Culture Action Europe, to give us an overview of where we are with the Culture Compass conversation and understand our next steps and how we move forward with advocacy. And of course, at the end, we'll have time for some questions or other conversations. But to begin, I'll hand things over to Louisa, who can give us an introduction and prime us a bit about where we are on the wider conversation with Culture Compass.
Thank you very much, Maya. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're glad to present a discussion paper titled Towards the Culture Compass, a sector blueprint. So what is the Culture Compass, and why did we decide to develop this discussion paper? The Culture Compass is the upcoming new strategy for culture from the European Commission, because the current one, the new European Agenda for Culture, was adopted back in 2018, before the pandemic, AI, multiple crises, wars. Clearly, the world has changed, and it's time for a new vision for cultural policies in the European Union. Ursula von der Leyen tasked Commissioner for Culture Glenn Mikulev with developing the Culture Compass last year. So during 2025, the Commission has been working on the Culture Compass, and if all goes according to plan, it should be presented in November this year. Meanwhile, we at Culture Action Europe took part in the public consultations organized by the Commission. We took part in the roundtable discussion about the Culture Compass in March. And ahead of the consultations, we started coordinating with our network members. And as we listened to many thoughtful, diverse ideas, we came to a clear conclusion. A document of such strategic importance deserves a vision from the cultural sector. We told our members, let's together create our own compass, our sector blueprint, to complement the Commission's work. So a sector blueprint is not an official EU document, it's a discussion paper from the cultural sector. And our hope is that it becomes a source of inspiration for the official Culture Compass. How did we create this blueprint? In spring, we launched a survey across our networks and received around 30 responses. Then, during our Beyond Gathering and Members Forum in Italy in June, those networks came together to discuss how can culture contribute to the EU priorities such as competitiveness, democracy, and security without being reduced to a tool for those priorities or agendas. How can culture address the urgent and real problems of today and at the same time thrive as a sector with its own ecosystem and with its own sector-specific problems? I must admit this wasn't an easy conversation because sometimes the choice of EU priorities was questioned. For example, shall culture contribute to security or to competitiveness? And we debated what these priorities mean for us, how to define them on our own terms, and how at the same time preserve artistic freedom, cultural democracy, autonomy of cultural organizations. From those discussions, 10 key topics emerged and 10 working groups were formed. One, artistic freedom. Two, working conditions. Three, artistic research, culture and innovation. Four, international cultural relations. Five, culture and health and well-being. Six, culture and sustainability. Seven, cultural participation. Eight, access to culture and arts education. Nine, culture and security. And 10, culture and digital. Each group then was asked to develop a 3-page policy brief over summer, following a common structure that we proposed. First, describe the context of a problem. Second, propose policy recommendations. And third, provide useful references, best practices, reports, studies, and existing models. There were networks who agreed to coordinate working groups. They decided how to collect input and contributions from other networks, how often to meet, what methodologies to use. So they were quite autonomous in how they structured the drafting process. At the end, we gathered all 10 briefs and worked to bring them under one umbrella, this sector blueprint. Some of them were longer than 3 pages, and we needed to edit the text a bit. But we agreed that although these policy briefs are all part of the blueprint, they can also be used separately as standalone documents in their full original versions. And here I want really to take a moment and acknowledge the very hard work of all the contributors and coordinators. I want to thank them for their patience and commitment and trust, because there was a lot of coordination, a lot of back and forth communication. So thank you for bearing with us. It has been a learning process for Culture Action Europe as well. We're very proud of our community. We're very proud of our networks who completed such a difficult and visionary and strategic work in such a short period of time. And we hope that you learned from this exercise as much as we did, and even managed to enjoy it and have a little bit of fun in the process. Content-wise, what do we propose in this discussion paper? We see culture as a foundational element of democratic and civic infrastructure, and access to culture and cultural participation as a fundamental right. So culture is a foundational public good which is beneficial for artists and the broader public alike. This idea has some important policy implications. First, it means that public funding is essential. If culture is not an industry, if culture cannot be left entirely to the market, it needs public support, it needs safeguards. And you'll see many recommendations in the blueprint that are connected to the next EU long-term budget, which is decided now. We want a strong, autonomous, properly funded culture program, plus culture funding in other programs such as Horizon Europe Competitiveness Fund, Global Europe Fund, national and regional partnership plans. In 2 weeks, we're going to have an online session dedicated specifically to budget issues, so more on that later. But of course, with public funding comes a question about artistic freedom. So when far-right governments are gaining power, we must be vigilant, because in some cases, public money means political control over artistic expression. And that's why we highlight the need for autonomy of cultural organizations, the arm's length principle, decentralized decision-making, and also the role of cultural networks. And there is a separate brief on artistic freedom where this vision is detailed. Second, if we treat culture as a public good, then a different set of priorities comes into focus. So across 10 policy briefs, you will find frequent references to socially engaged arts, community building, cultural participation, cultural democracy, access to culture and arts education, inclusion, accessibility in general. But we try to go beyond just access and inclusion. As the cultural participation brief puts it, cultural participation is a way to co-create future narratives. And you'll see a lot in our introduction about how culture equips us for the future by allowing us to inhabit these fictional worlds and imagine lives that are beyond our own. So, culture, in our opinion, as a public good, highlights the future making and transformative role of culture. And finally, more broadly, this positioning of culture invites us also to reconsider the role and competence of the EU. As you all know, in the EU, culture is a national competence, so member states are in charge because culture and cultural identity is deeply rooted in local, regional, and national contexts. But if we talk about culture as a public good, something that matters to everyone and everywhere, then we are naturally pointing beyond borders and beyond the idea of culture as simply a driver of national or even European identity. Culture now operates more globally. We have digital environment, AI, global mental health crisis, sustainability issues, artist mobility, wars, displacement. So cultural policies need to adjust. And this doesn't mean at the moment replacing national competence, but rather it means complementing it with a supranational one. We're talking here about stronger international cultural cooperation, decentralized and more participatory governance models, digital cultural rights, investing in cultural infrastructure and cultural participation. And we believe that these are areas where the EU can lead together with member states. So that is quite an ambitious vision, but sector blueprint is where we tried to train our political imagination a little bit. So these are the implications of recognizing culture as a public good at the EU level, public funding, new priorities, new competences. And let me also share with you a couple of other interesting observations. One theme that came up repeatedly across the policy briefs is the need for more coordinated data. You'll find calls for new observatories for artistic freedom, for health and well-being, education, inclusion. But if you're familiar with Culture Action Europe's work, and especially our State of Culture report, you'll remember our criticism of policymaking that leans too heavily or exclusively on numbers, on calculated images, while ignoring this political imagination. But I would say that in this case, the call for data is itself political, and one good example is artistic freedom. When it comes to artistic freedom, the European Commission is exploring stronger financial conditionality in the next budget. That means if member states violate the rule of law, and if that's properly documented, member states could lose access to funding. So monitoring infringements on artistic freedom becomes a strategic tool. And at some point, we were considering if there is a need for a culture observatory under Agora EU, but then we realized that there is already a lot of data out there. There are Eurobarometers, Eurostat, civil society, monitoring, research reports, but it's fragmented. What we need now is to coordinate it better and to put it to good use, which we also try to do with our list of references and sources. Also, another observation is that our blueprint shifts or drifts away from soft coordination policy tools. It calls instead for harder safeguards at the EU level, things like Artistic Freedom Act, conditionality in funding, and even our treaty level upgrades or ambitions. Right, and two initiatives that I would like to highlight here are the Artistic Freedom Act and the Charter on Working Conditions in Culture. Both would mark a shift towards more enforceable rights and structural support. And if you allow me to be bold for a moment, I would say that compared to the new European Agenda for Culture, if you remember, it was structured around social, economic, and international components or aspects of culture. This blueprint repositions culture as the foundation of democracy, as democracy's infrastructure, with rights, with freedoms, fair working conditions. So it calls for more binding guarantees, for budgetary mechanisms, for policy frameworks. And I think this blueprint also shows well a mainstreaming approach to culture, because the authors, the contributors, don't just call for better access to existing cultural funding, but they also point to opportunities across wider EU strategies, from the European Democracy Shield to the upcoming EU Teachers and Trainers agenda and Union of Skills. So I'm genuinely proud that we managed to show this balance, that only by treating culture as a proper sector with its own infrastructure, rules, freedoms, and safeguards, the culture itself, the sector itself, can meaningfully shape other policy. So whether it's the digital space, environmental sustainability, or security, culture indeed needs a strong backbone if it's going to be transformative. So before I hand over to Maya in 1 minute, I want to acknowledge where there is still room for improvement. Because the blueprint is quite ambitious. It's a result of collaborative process, many different visions from many different contributors and networks. So it proposes this treaty level changes, new forms of conditionality, new institutional formats, from creative innovation dialogues to digital assemblies. But also, to make these ideas operational, we probably need an additional legal playbook, something that helps translate this big vision into grant criteria, into conditionality mechanisms, into coordination mechanisms for new bodies and new pieces of legislation. And you'll see that some policy briefs already offer some clear roadmaps. Others are still conceptual and probably need further thinking on governance or legal feasibility. But I think this is very good, because the blueprint provided us with a solid mapping of the policy landscape, and we know where to work on next. So the blueprint is an open framework on which we can build our further advocacy. And finally, it's a great testing ground ahead of the budget negotiations. And I think that the multi-annual financial framework discussions offer a real opportunity to put some of these ideas into practice and see how they hold up. So I will stop here, and Maya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Louisa. This was, of course, super helpful, I think, also to give us context and give us some background on this process, which, of course, we didn't just release this on Monday. This has been months of work across multiple organizations and networks. So thank you for illuminating that. On that note, I want to dig a little bit deeper into the blueprint and yeah, ask some of the contributors about their experience and get a little bit of context on what they've contributed and how that process has gone for them. So I first want to reach out to Manon Moulin from Reset Network, who's here with us.
Yeah, hi.
Bring Manon in. Manon, thank you for being here. And
Thank you.
I see you have the first policy brief in the blueprint. Could you introduce yourself and your organization for those who might not know you, and then tell us briefly about your chapter in the sector blueprint?
Yeah, sure. First, thank you so much for organizing this session, as the blueprint is such an important initiative, as Louisa has highlighted, into the current discussion around the next MFF. So, hi everyone, I'm Manon Moulin. I am the editorial and advocacy officer for the Reset Network. Reset is a network of independent cultural and media organizations in Europe. We count 136 members in 33 countries right now, and counting. We started in 2022, so we're quite a recent network, but we're growing slowly and steadily. The members that we count are transsexual, so the variable that is common to all of us is this notion of independence, which is really dear to us, and which make a direct link with our contribution to the blueprint. As Maya said, we coordinated and edited the first proposal that is around the notion of artistic freedom. And so, of course, when you represent and defend independent cultural players, artistic freedom is a notion that you come across immediately. And so, yeah, basically we worked along with 13 other networks, members of Cultural Action Europe, for this policy brief. And we basically started by, from the point of artistic freedom is a freedom that is not considered as itself right now in EU like institution and legal framework, basically. Usually artistic freedom just is considered under the freedom of expression, which is fine, but it kind of limits the impact and the comprehension of people of what it means to be an artist and what it entails to protect artistic practices. So we started from there, and we tried to formulate proposal to better take into consideration artistic freedom and artistic practices in Europe, and to try and protect them to the best extent possible. So we formulated 8 different proposals around the notion of artistic freedom that are in the document. And yeah, I don't know if I'm supposed to go deeper or if you're going to ask more questions about this, but
You can go a little deeper if you want, of course.
So but in terms of like how we structured, the idea was that we really wanted to have every participating member of Cultural Action Europe input into this. So we basically had a shared document, and we had multiple calls throughout the process in order to gather the ideas and gather the most urgent action that we think should be taken. Since the artistic freedom is a broad notion, we already had to agree on the definition that we wanted to start with in order to then decide on what to propose. So we started with a definition from UNESCO that is quite thorough, and that, as Luisa touched on earlier, explains the problematic of governmental censorship, for example, that is very limiting nowadays, political interference, but also of economic interference of non-state actors, because censorship could also be put upon artists by corporations, and it's more and more the case in Europe. And so from this, we very much started from a zero ground, as artistic freedom is not recognized in the EU legal framework, as I said. And so the first thing that we thought must come was integrating and recognizing artistic freedom into the EU rule of law. And that's really something that that's the first proposal basically of our policy brief. And that's something that we think, and all the contributors think, that should kind of be the first step to take, and between brackets, of course, but quite an easy step to take, let's say, because putting it into the rule of law report at least would open a possibility of acknowledging it exists, acknowledging that there is a problem and there is something to protect, and then opens up new possibilities, such as setting up an observatory on artistic freedom, or having an artistic freedom index, just like the media freedom index, for example, or having an artistic freedom act, just like the media. I think that the how we kind of work through and how the proposal kind of go one after the other into our policy brief is also very representative of the advocacy work that Reset is trying to do, as there is a lot of parallel with the framework that already exists for media, for example. And since as a network, we represent both cultural and media independent players, that's a parallel that we are trying to put forward, as there are a lot of similarities between the media sector and the cultural sector, both in terms of threats and challenges, but also in terms of daily practices. So yeah, that's the broad framework of the policy brief that we've coordinated.
Thank you. I mean, going off a bit of what you were just mentioning, is there, in very practical terms, what are the next steps for your advocacy, and also maybe ways that people can be involved?
Yeah, sure. As I said, Reset is a very new network compared to others. So our advocacy work is really just starting. So you should follow us because there's going to be more. But in terms of like continuing our advocacy work around artistic freedom, we are trying to be present all over Europe into a variety of events and organizing talks to gather experts around the notion and also artists that are being pressured and censored to try and gather their testimonies basically and their words and their voices. So raising voices of people that are concerned by the topic is really something that we're trying to do from now. We also, around artistic freedom, we released a call for testimony around censorship that is happening to artists that are trying to support Palestine. So that's something that is ongoing for now. So we are gathering testimonies on our website. There's a link where you can testify if you have been pressured or censored in your own country in Europe regarding your support to Palestine. So that's one thing we're doing right now. Participating to talks, of course, and yeah, with the blueprint, of course, we're going to work as much as possible to try and pass the word on. Yeah, and there are some other activities that we're developing that I won't talk here, but it's going to be released in a few months now. So yeah, keep an eye on Reset, as there are going to be some interesting things that are linked with artistic freedom and economic concentration within the cultural sector. That is one big threat upon artists and cultural workers. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Manon. And again, if you would like to read, I mean, I hope you read all of the policy briefs, but the artistic freedom policy brief is what we kick off the blueprint with, #1. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite Marco Fiore from Michael Culture Association, and let me bring you on in. Thank you for being here, and I would love to hear more about your chapter, your policy brief on culture and digital, which I have here. I'm showing you because it's physical, chapter 10. Please, Marco, give us an introduction of yourself, of Michael Culture, and a little bit about your chapter.
Yes. So good morning, everyone. I'm Marco Fiore from Michael Cultural Association. We are a European trans-domain network bringing together digital cultural communities, specifically digital cultural heritage communities. Before talking about the chapter, I just wanted to send a message. Between yesterday and today, most of the boats in the global Sumud flotilla, a peaceful international civilian mission to deliver life-saving aid to Gaza, were intercepted by Israeli forces in international waters. This interception is against international law, since the boats were only carrying food and basic life supply for a population that is under starvation and victim of an internationally recognized genocide. I am sending you a link in the chat. With this link, you can quickly send an email to your national authorities, to request them to uphold their duty to protect their citizens in the global Subud flotilla, and to demand that Israel ensures the safe passage of the flotilla. You can put your name, email, and select your country of reference, and the system will automatically send the template email to the concerned national authority. Consider also joining local strikes that are being organized all across Europe in the coming days. Free Palestine. And here is the link. So back to the chapter. What is the idea for us was really to have a focus on what is going on in the digital world, because I think we can all agree that now the digital realm is a space of culture. The platforms, both online and offline and online, technology and digital, are shaping our vision of life, and most of the times we feel like they're shaping without us being concretely active in this world. And of course, MCA was at the helm of the task, because we are coordinating with Culture Action Europe, the action group on digital and AI, and Maya and Luisa were here with me since the beginning of this adventure. And the idea of the action group was really to bring the perspective of the cultural and creative sector in the digital policies in Europe. So the digital is a space of culture, and from that we moved the whole chapter. The chapter is the collaboration of 10 organizations that met during August and the beginning of September. We were both a little bit in vacation. We were writing the chapter, and I'm known to procrastinate things at the latest minute. So of course we were really in a hurry, but I think that I'm really happy with the results, meaning that we tried to drive all the reflection elements that we had in mind. And as Luisa was saying at the beginning, we tried to give a very concrete side on the thing, meaning that we targeted specific policy instruments, specific funding instruments to support what we were trying to say. The chapter, of course, I invite you to read it. It's both physical, as Maya showed you, but it's also online, and it goes through this idea that culture should be focal in the digital realm, and at the same time we are experiencing this imbalance between the deployment of technology, the deployment of policies about digital and technology, and the real needs in the cultural sector. So we want to bring back this focus to let's do what we need and not deployment just for the sake of it. And this brings also to the discussion of digital governance. Digital governance that we propose should be brought with a bottom-up approach from the cultural sector, not only in the digital policies at EU level. You might have participated to our last session in the action group where we talked about digital policy in EU, and one of the things that were discussed is that there is no specific priority for the European Union in the field of digital, but the European Union creates regulation and directives that concerns digital, but because it target mainly the common market. So every product, every element that touches the consumer and the citizens of Europe then is regulated, and so Europe can act on digital policies like this, bringing in also a reflection that like the GDPR was starting because of this, was the idea of bringing more agency to the people and in managing their own data. And of course, there is this discussion talking about data of AI. We in the chapter we talk about copyright. And we talk about fair remuneration. And since we have the revision of the copyright directive, 2019 copyright directive that is coming in 2026, we strongly urge the directive to be also reviewed in the light of fair remuneration of cultural creators, artistic creators, but also for the whole information ecosystem, because also cultural heritage institutions, they are kind of victims of some text and data mining. That's a whole topic. I mean, I think that's the ones that are reading Luisa's and my articles are pretty aware of the whole discussion. But at the end of the day, the whole thing of the chapter is bringing back agency to the cultural sector in an environment, the digital environment, that has been brought to our life very heavily in the last 5 years since the COVID pandemic. But it's cultural it's more cultural than ever, this space. So this is more or less what is said, and I really the first part of the chapter is really about reflections, but I'm really proud of the solutions that we propose. Among them, probably the less feasible one, but it's the most the one that dreams the most, is the creation of a right to culture in the digital space as a principle of the digital decade. And after that, I'll hand you the floor, Maya. But the idea is that the digital decade is based on 6 digital rights that you can easily access on internet. It's a European Declaration on Digital Rights and Principles. And what we think is that cultural rights are being recognized and ratified in more or less all the European countries. What we think is since the principle of one of the principles of the digital decade is that everything that is illegal offline should be illegal online, then this means that also if we want to talk about cultural rights, these cultural rights should also be protected in the digital space. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Marco. I also want to ask about any upcoming actions or coordinations that might be happening in this area.
Yeah. Talking about the action group, which is the most concrete tools that we have in our hands, you can join the action group, and invite you, if you're not part of it, to join it. We sent updates yesterday evening. I sent the link to a consultation that is being open for the transparency Article 50 of the AI Act, and the consultation that is being opened by the European Commission. Second thing that you can do is read about digital policy and the things that are coming up in Europe, and understand that digital policy is something that also concerns you as a cultural professional. And the last thing is to be aware that the MFF is a very important fight for all the things that we are saying, also in the digital realm, because the envelope for digital what is called now digital leadership has been quintuple. I cannot even say it in English. It's 5 times more. Okay, so it's a big envelope, and we need to make sure that the culture and creative sector is included in the whole reflection and the discussion about it.
Thank you. And of course, that's also a reminder for the 15th of October, we have our next campaign meeting, which will give us some more tools and insight around how we can push for some of these things that Marco is talking about. So thank you so much for joining us, and really thank you for making space in this meeting today to take action for us to write to our national authorities and protect the global Sumud flotilla. For those of you who are in Belgium, there are a number of demonstrations across the country starting at 6 p.m. If you're in Antwerp like me, we meet at the central station. So if you want to join me, come. Thank you, Marco, for creating that space for us.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you for organizing.
Okay, so next we have Joost Heinsius, who will be speaking on the chapter Working Conditions, which is number 2. I'm adding you into the conversation. Hello, Joost. Thank you for being here today. I'm wondering if you could introduce yourself and create a flip and tell us a little bit about the Working Conditions policy brief.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks a lot for inviting us. So my name is Joost Heintjes. I work for a Creative Flip project. It's kind of network project, and we work a lot on like giving more access to finance, to IP tools, also on cross-sectoral working and with creative hubs. But there's also a big part on working conditions, and it's like kind of like follow-up from the OMC working group on working conditions. We developed a tool which gives access to information for all 27 member states on labor relations, social security, artistic freedom, etc. So that's where we're coming from. And during our work, what we see is really that there's a big gap between what the sector really needs concerning working conditions and what on EU level is really happening. So after the resolution of the European Parliament and the bit disappointing answer of the Commission, to say the least, we were developing the idea of like kind of framework on working conditions. And we have been talking with like a formal working group of fair pay movement from different parts of Europe, which we started this January. And we started to develop more this kind of framework. And the interesting thing is that this could be like a modular thing, which could work on both EU level, on national level, to make it stronger. And it concerns like a certain set of topics, for example, fair pay, fair labor relations, fair social security, and fair taxation, which I think are very clear and important parts of what so it's like fair working conditions. And each of those topics would have like a consistent structure. It would have like priority, really clear priority for each topic. Also, like enumerate good practices, have references to EU regulations, but also national legal frameworks, and have indicators of how it can be like progressed. And I think it's not important not to only have this kind of framework, but also how to develop it. So we also said there should be like consultation process, which has like an expert working group, several rounds of consultation, etc. And together, this consultation, this framework would like be kind of charter on working conditions, which could be subscribed by both member states, but also by the Commission. Will be like a first step toward like more binding communication by the Commission, and could also be subscribed by cultural organizations and other intermediaries, etc. And I think that's yeah, really important to say here. And I think you're going to ask immediately about the next steps. Um, so, well, I mean, of course, you're all waiting for the cultural compass. They were talking about working conditions, and also because there in December there will be a high-level roundtable on working conditions, where all the networks, European networks, can have their say about the working conditions. And we would like to collaborate with Culture Action Europe and all its members to more develop this idea about the charter, and to be able to present it there as a next step on how to bring this forward, because that's, I mean, the fair working conditions is something that the sector really needs, and I think maybe even more now than ever.
Perfect. Thank you, Joost. I mean, you definitely answered the question I was going to ask next. And I suppose then we keep everyone posted on the conversation that comes up later in the year, so that we can see where there might be ways to contribute to the conversation or perhaps into the development of the charter. Thank you very much. This actually leads us really nicely into bringing us back to Louisa, who will be talking about next steps. How do we take action next? So thank you, Joost. I'll bring in Louisa.
First of all, I'd like to mention that we already shared our sector blueprint with Commissioner Mikalev, with his cabinet. We know that this discussion paper was well received, and as every professional in the cultural sector, we are looking forward to the publication and adoption of the official culture compass in November to do then comparative exercise. Also, our Secretary General, Lars Ebert, is now in Barcelona, offline from Barcelona, where the Monday Code conference ended, where he did some promo of our sector blueprint with national culture ministers. I know that we're also planning an event at the European Parliament about the compass at the beginning of next year. I can't share more details now, but we'll keep you posted. And also, obviously, we will be presenting the blueprint at the Danish Cultural Conference, the Danish Presidency Cultural Conference in November. I think for us, it's important to remember that Culture Compass, our sector blueprint, and the MFF, the next long-term EU budget, are two sides of the same coin. And that's why we would like really to see them interconnected. That's why now, based on the contributions on the policy briefs of the sector blueprint, I already outlined 20 proposals when it comes to the MFF, and we at Culture Action Europe are drafting now our position on culture in the next MFF. We have our old policy position paper now, since the first MFF package was published in July, and then in September we are updating, we are coming up with more concrete policy proposals, we are coming up with concrete legislative amendments, both to the Agora EU proposal and at the same time Competitiveness Fund, Horizon Europe, Global Europe Fund, national and regional partnership plans, and having having a sector blueprint, having the culture compass from the cultural sector is a very good base for us to come up with these legislative amendments. Can you hear me? Because my image is freezing a little bit.
We hear you. You are just a bit frozen, but we do hear you.
Okay, great. So on the 15th of October, as we mentioned, please join us to join our campaign meeting where we will be discussing exactly how those ideas outlined in the compass, in the sector blueprint, can be translated into actual policy proposals when it comes to the next MFF. And sometimes something that Marco just mentioned, for example, we have huge budget for digital in the new MFF, and we want culture and cultural rights to be recognized and acknowledged in this budget. How do we do that at the practical level? Having the legislative text, having the regulation proposal, right? And that applies to so many other initiatives. Even the EU Charter on working conditions in the cultural sector. Currently, in the Agora EU proposal, we see clear reference to working conditions of artists and culture and creative sector professionals as one of the main principles of the culture strand, but we don't know how it will be implemented or operationalized in practice. And our goal is to build concrete proposals based on the contributions in the sector blueprint. So that's our big plan for the next couple of months until the end of the year, I guess. We will be looking forward to the publication of the actual compass. We will be working on how to translate compass ideas into the practical policy suggestions in the next MFF. And we hope with this document to create really powerful synergy between strategy and funding, because we believe that no strategy can be effective without proper funding, and no funding can be effective without good and coherent vision for how we're going to spend this money. So that's it from our side. And now I guess we are opening up the space for your comments, remarks, or if you also contributed to the Culture Compass and want to share your impressions, your experience, now is the moment to do so.
Thank you, Louisa. Yeah, of course, if there's any questions also that you might want to ask the other contributors more specifically about their work, feel free. I do see that they're still in the room now. But otherwise, I mean, you also know where to find us, and we will, of course, continue to be in contact with you as we move forward and as we continue advocating in the course of the MFF. Feel free. I can't necessarily see if hands are being raised, but if you want to say anything, you can just unmute, and jump in. And that's okay if there aren't any comments or questions either. Feel free to take your time with the sector blueprint and read through. And also, it is a living document. It is something that we see, like Louisa had said, these also can be standalone policy briefs. So there might be ways in which the advocacy you're doing in your work, in your circles, that you can bring bits of the blueprint into what you're working on. So we do hope to also find synergies that way. I'm admitting some people in right at the few moments. So I think what I will do, I've shared with you the link for our next campaign meeting. These are also open to the public. So if you know that there are people in your networks, if you're overseeing networks or those who you work with, feel free to invite them so that we keep people informed and updated. And I do see we have Lars that is joining us. So let me bring him in.
Hi everyone, and sorry, Maya, I had planned to stay in decoration modus because I'm just landing from Mondiacult with a considerable delay in Ljubljana, and it's very noisy here at the luggage belt. I hope that's not too disturbing. But now that there is some time, and I prefer to give the time to everyone in the room, I would just want to say maybe 2 or 3 things that I personally found important in the process looking back, because that exercise, and sorry, Marco, I know it was August, but beach time when we made everyone work. But that exercise of really seeing how 30 networks followed that invitation to come together in groups and work over the summer and develop those chapters has been so touching to me, and is an exercise that I think we need to prolong now and extend also. And with extending, I mean looking at the Agora EU program at the moment, or also what was mentioned by Marco and Luisa as well, the broader MFF and the discussions that we need to lead there. We need to extend the group of people we have in our conversation. And I think it's a good starting point that we kind of have built up in the last years, that trust within our network and our network members and all the other interested members to engage in these thorough conversations. But those conversations also show where there's still a big need of more in-depth conversation, where we need to get to the bottom of things, where we are maybe not speaking with a united voice yet, where we don't necessarily know where the diversity of voices can be turned into a strength, which I strongly believe in it is, and where we might need miss voices like voices from the audiovisual sector, or journalists or civil society that also look at the Agora EU program now, in which we are together, and where I strongly believe we need to find synergies and stand together to defend what we've got, and also look in other areas like the digital envelope, research, regional funds, and so on, to get to the 2% funding for culture overall. So for me, I hope that this conversation that has led to this Compass Pro blueprint is a starting point to keep on talking and get more people in, which is one of the reasons I'm in Ljubljana now, talking to the film funders in the next days. And at the same time, pursue our steps on a more concrete level, like yours mentioned, with the high-level roundtable on working conditions, to work on the charter to become a reality, but also in a campaign that we've joined for artistic freedom together with the Resistance Now movement coming out of the Bratislava Declaration, to work on an Artistic Freedom Act legislative proposal that is very concrete and that makes legislative changes tangible, to have the rule of law report amended, and at the same time a freedom of artistic freedom act. So I think these two levels, where we are very concretely working on each area in the Compass and enhancing the overall conversation, is the challenge ahead. And I'm really hopeful with what I've seen in the last months, that we can in all our diversity, and partly with all the contested areas that are in the conversation, we can extend the conversation and really stand together towards the conversations about the MFF, the Compass, and the work plan that are coming up. That's what I wanted to bring in with all the background noise.
Thank you. No, we appreciate it, and I'm glad you could join us for a few moments. Thank you all for joining, and I will just reiterate what Luisa had said earlier. I mean, a huge thank you to our contributors and those who took part in the process. It was like you are seeing and hearing no easy feats, but I think a very valuable exercise, and clearly a very strong and united effort that is positioning us to be in a very strong place to advocate moving forward. So we're looking forward to working alongside you all. Feel free to join us on the 15th. We will, of course, record that as well. So any updates and materials that we will be sharing then, you'll also have access to afterwards. And of course, the link to the blueprint is available in the chat. And definitely just echoing Marco's voice for a call to action to write to your national authorities to protect the Global Samud Flotilla. Thank you. The link is in the chat as well. And yes, please be in touch if you have any questions. I'm Maya from Culture Action Europe. We have Luisa and Lars, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.